Sam Darnold stinks it up in his Vikings playoff debut, while the Rams advance to the divisional playoffs. We have takeaways from that game, plus the latest news and notes on coaching and players throughout the league on this edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
And I'm your other co-host, Michelle Magdziuk. And when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with the NFL Network.
Yeah, we'll get into the Monday night takeaways, the last of the wild card games. Another stinker. The Rams take care of the Vikings. The Vikings offense really struggled. So we'll get into that game, look at some coaching latest news there, as well as some things happening with some of the teams out of the playoffs already news-wise. So we'll get to all that in today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, I went in, Michelle, thinking this game was going to be pretty good. I mean, they were only favored by 2.5 points, the Vikings. They shouldn't have been favored at all based on this game. It was pretty bad. They didn't get that scoop and score in their favor early. The Rams end up with the scoop and score later in the game and really harassed Sam Darnold, a record for a playoff game, 9 sacks, but Sam Darnold was holding the ball too long. He was bad before that. He just looked terrible. Now, what we learned from here is maybe Sam Darnold, look, they went as far as they could go with him. They went 14-3, good for them in the regular season. But you've talked about J.J. McCarthy being as a sleeper next year. Does this make you want to say they're going to go all in on McCarthy, and maybe we should too?
They're going to have to, right? They're going to have a hard decision when Sam Darnold was playing well, I think, this offseason to say, all right, do we pay Sam Darnold or do we save the money and go with our rookie who we just drafted in the first round last year? And I think they should thank Sam Darnold, right, for putting up these stinkers and showing them, all right, thank goodness we didn't pay you. I don't know if anyone has lost more money in a 2-game span without a career-ending injury. I've never seen anything like it, but it's been a terrible 2-game span where the Vikings scored 9 points in each of the last 2 games, 2 of the most important games in their season. And Sam Darnold looked atrocious. Even the 1 passing touchdown he threw in this game, so far behind TJ Hawkinson. I mean, Hawkinson made a great catch and run afterwards. It was a terrible throw. So Sam Darnold, I think, is done with Minnesota. I don't think a team's going to pay him. Maybe he's still a starter somewhere with someone desperate and they didn't get a quarterback. But Darnold had a nice little run. It's done. I'm excited to see J.J. McCarthy in this offense next year, and I think he becomes a sleeper in fantasy later in drafts because if Kevin O'Connell could do what he did with Sam Darnold, what can he do with an actual, we'll see if McCarthy can be good.
Yeah, and the funny thing is I think Sam Darnold might actually be the choice in Atlanta. Similar offense to back up Michael Penix Jr. I think that could be what he's looking at now. Because if I'm the Giants or Raiders or Titans or Saints or any of these teams that need a quarterback potentially next year, I'd rather go the rookie route if I can, find someone cheaper. Sam Darnold's going to ask for too much. If he's 30 to 35 million, that's way too much. I mean, 10 million, they got a great bargain. They got what they could out of him, but they got to move on. And again, that's how you win in this league. You get those young franchise quarterbacks. But admirable season for him, except he lost to the 2 teams, and he lost to them twice. The Lions, Rams. And that was enough to end their season. Now, looking at Jordan Addison, he had a very quiet game. I think it was attached to Sam Darnold. Really, Justin Jefferson had a quiet game. Are you any bit concerned about Jordan Addison for next year with McCarthy possibly being the quarterback, or do you think this actually helps him that he's kind of established himself with Jefferson and Hawkinson as a big 3 target of this team?
I think he's established himself, but it's going to be a lot like Devonta Smith, where he's going to disappear in games. And, you trust Jalen Hurts a little bit more than you're going to trust J.J. McCarthy as a rookie. So it's going to be a lot like going into this last year. We didn't know what to get out of Sam Darnold. Jordan Addison definitely paid up on his draft costs. You got more out of him than what you spent in the draft, but there's still a lot of down games and some big games. I think that's just what you're going to get out of Addison. I think he's a good flex play. And as long as he stays at that price where you can put him as a wide receiver 3 flex play in any given week, then he will be a nice option in drafts. I want to talk about the running backs though, because Aaron Jones It's kind of fallen off for him. It never was like a great season for him, but older running back. He's a free agent this year. Does he land on another team, or do the Vikings re-sign him to be the lead? Or is he going to kind of go the Ezekiel Elliott route where it's like, it's just like a bunch of random teams and doesn't get much usage?
Yeah, I don't think they're all that interested in bringing him back, to be honest. I think they'd be okay with Cam Akers in the system. I mean, they like Cam Akers for some reason. Kevin O'Connell looks like he's going to get a contract extension soon. So he's been the guy with their GM to bring back Akers or bring him there to town twice here. So I think they like Akers. I think they'll look in the draft. We'll talk about the top option. I think he's going to be in play for several teams in this first round because I think he's a difference maker of that level. But yeah, a lot of teams are going to have running back changes, and the Vikings are just one of them. One team I don't think is going to have a running back change next year, the Rams. Kyren Williams just gets it done every week, and you loved him before the season. I was wondering if he could stay healthy. He did that. He looked even more durable than last year. They kind of managed his touches well, where they weren't really giving him committee competition with Blake Corum all that much, but they were just making sure they didn't overwork him and use him in the right spots. And that's a testament to Sean McVay, who doesn't really overwork any of his players and practice all that good stuff. So when you look at Kyren Williams, I mean, how high do you take this guy next year? I mean, we know it's all over potentially for Christian McCaffrey as a top pick, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. We saw some of the usual suspects, Barkley, Derrick Henry. Where do you take Kyren Williams next year? Because this guy could be the key to them maybe winning again in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has to go after those guys you just named, after Bijan, Barkley, Gibbs, and maybe Derrick Henry. But again, with Derrick Henry, sooner or later it has to fall off, right? So maybe you go with the younger guy. But I mean, Henry was so good this year. That will be a hard decision. But definitely Bijan, Barkley, and Gibbs ahead of him. I'm just talking about running backs, obviously, like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, and those guys will go ahead of Kyren as well. But Kyren should be a late first round pick confidently. He was falling into the late second round last year for no reason. He needs to be a first round pick. He gets all the work. Blake Corum, got hurt instantly when he had his one game, broke his forearm. I guess he should probably be good by the time the season starts next year, but this is still Kyren Williams' backfield.
Yeah, I'm excited for what he can do next year and really the rest of the playoffs. We'll see what he can do against the Eagles. The Eagles are a tough run defense, so we'll see. But again, tough run defenses haven't been a problem for the better backs in the league so far. Now let's go to their passing game. Like Matthew Stafford looked pretty good, just threw for more than 200 yards. Had a lot of things going in his favor, including the defense scoring, and not a lot of work needed to be done in the office. But now it looks like he's going to come back here. We weren't sure if he was going to retire, but again, they have good vibes. They're winning. Sean McVay doesn't look like he's stepping away anytime soon. But the guy I have a question about is still Cooper Kupp. He's going to be 31.
Yeah.
He had one catch in this game for 29. It was not a great matchup for the receivers, even though the Vikings have been giving it up. The Rams weren't really challenged this game. But Kupp contained one catch. He's 31. He's got a lot of injuries. I don't know. I think I have some vibes that this could be the end here for Cooper Kupp if they don't get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he has a $29 million cap hit next year if they keep him. They don't save a ton by cutting him. I would have to look at the post-June, but I don't expect Cooper Kupp to be on this team next year unless he takes a big pay cut and they figure that out. But I mean, they're just not using him at all. And I don't know what happened because he was having a pretty solid season up until week 15. And then it's 0 yards, 24, 29, 29 with one reception in each of the last two games. Every time Higbee touched the ball, I kept thinking it was Kupp. Higbee was moving stupidly well. I was like, why does he look so fast and good? And then he gets hurt and has to go to the hospital. So that kind of ended quickly. But yeah, I think Cooper Kupp is done. On the other hand, though, Puka Nacua, I know they didn't need him much, but in the beginning of that game, he looked great. Only ended up with 5 receptions for 44 yards and 9 targets. But maybe he'll have a bigger game against the Eagles. He did in their first matchup, but the Eagles defense has been playing lights out, so maybe not. But I'm not worried about what Puka Nacua does so much in the postseason. He looked so great when he was healthy in the regular season, and you're just going to keep rolling with him early in drafts next year.
Yeah, it was just really weird. We had high expectations for Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua in this game. The matchups were good. Everything lined up. We thought it was going to be a higher scoring back and forth affair. Didn't happen. There's a lot of disappointing performances. AJ Brown, we're looking at you this weekend. But when you look at it in the last game against the Eagles, I know they had some of their young defensive backs still growing, but 9 catches, 117 yards on 13 targets. So he should be just fine in the rematch. And you figure the Rams might be playing from behind, and that will definitely help them. Now, we will get into some of the coaching news. Yes, we already have a new coach hired. We have another coach fired, all that good stuff. And we'll talk about what some teams are thinking about offensive coordinator right after we take this quick break. All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by TurboTax. Yeah, and tax time is going to be here sooner than you think, and the deadline in April. But look, this is when you need some help from Intuit TurboTax. Taxes, we're waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, then waiting, wondering, and some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as they. All experts give your taxes their undivided individual attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. Check it out, an expert who will find every deduction possible for you and file every form, every investment, everything ever needed with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guaranteed and details at TurboTax.com/guarantees today. All right, Michelle, let's continue the show. And we've got some interesting news here. The Patriots, no surprise here. They fired Gerard Mayo. They were the first to hire a coach. It's Mike Vrabel, full-time coach. Not a surprise, former linebacker for them and Michelle Steelers. So he's on this team right now. Big success with the Titans. Now the biggest question is, who is he going to get as the offense coordinator for Drake May? Because we have some expectations for Drake May. We want some big things from him now. A name that's already resurfaced, shocker, is Josh McDaniels. Do you like to hear this, Michelle, for Drake May's future?
No, please no. Like, they need to just cut ties with this Tom Brady era and this Bill Belichick. Like, McDaniels was great because he had Tom Brady. He had the best quarterback in NFL history. Like, no, don't go get McDaniels. He's not going to help Drake May develop. Don't even think about it. And I think I also think it stinks for Gerard Mayo, because I think at the whole time they wanted Vrabel. They didn't know he was going to get fired last offseason. They already promised Mayo that he would be the successor to Bill Belichick. So they gave him 1 year, and then they're like, okay, yeah, bye. So Mike Vrabel, I like the hire as a coach. I think that's good overall for the team. But they need to find a really good OC to develop Drake May, and that will be Vrabel's job to find him. But it better not be Josh McDaniels.
Well, the one thing he did say, Vrabel, is that they have a very long list. So basically, they're looking at everybody possible. Maybe a Clint Kubiak, who's out there, was fired by the Saints. He's gotten some looks here as an OC. So that would not be a bad direction, right? He's pretty good. He comes from that 49ers Kyle Shanahan system. So that could be good. So we're going to watch it carefully. But this hire is very critical here. I think Vrabel will do his due diligence here, and I really hope it's not McDaniels, as Michelle said. Now, the Cowboys will have a new offensive direction, so we'll see what happens there. They said goodbye to Kellen Moore, and then he ended up with the Chargers and now Eagles. He could potentially return. Jason Witten's been thrown out as a name. Ben Johnson, see how these playoffs play out. Joe Brady, and, of course, last but not least, certainly not least, Deion Sanders. So what are you thinking? What's going to happen with Dallas, and do they need this change? I mean, the offense really – I think it just kind of lost its luster the last 2 years with McCarthy versus Kellen Moore.
Yeah, I think McCarthy's just one of those where the voice gets the players are just sick of McCarthy. Yeah. The whatever he's trying to say in the meetings, whatever, it's not working anymore, right? They have to make a change. McCarthy's just one of those old school coaches. I don't know if it's going to work at head coach anymore. Now, maybe like the Patriots should consider bringing him in an OC and developing Drake May. I actually wouldn't hate that. But in terms of like who you get most excited about, Ben Johnson to the Cowboys seems extremely interesting. Also,
Mhm.
the fact like the Cowboys is a really good organization to go to. I know they haven't won anything in a long time, but they do not make drastic decisions to fire coaches. Like you get chances, a lot of chances before they finally move on from you. So if you're Ben Johnson, that's a pretty good landing spot from you if you finally want to leave the Lions as OC.
Yeah, I would love it for Dak Prescott because I think some of the similarities are there. CeeDee Lamb's a slot-based receiver like Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have a pretty good tight end in Jake Ferguson, much like Sam Laporta. So there's some nice parallels that you look at. And the most important thing he'll do is get that running back room going again and get them to rush the ball well, have a more explosive, complete offense, maybe find a deep threat they can stretch the field with a little bit like Jameson Williams. So that would be the most exciting hire. Look, I don't want to go back to Kellen Moore. I've already seen this. Joe Brady, maybe a little too young. Jason Witten basically is going to be like the Patriots going to McDaniels, like throwing it back to like some Jason Garrett type days. But that said, I mean, Dak Prescott's had some good success in that past. So we'll see how it plays out here for the Cowboys, but certainly it's the most marquee job. And we really hope they throw a lot of money at Ben Johnson. Now, McCarthy, look, already rumored to go to the Bears, the Saints. He once was the Saints offensive coordinator, believe it or not, a while ago. So when you have the Bears and Saints, I mean, I don't know where you want to go with these teams. It seems awfully slow, given that both of these teams fired their coaches pretty early or mid-season here. So I don't know what kind of offensive vibes do you feel from the Bears and Saints. Clearly, I think Chicago has greater upside than New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, if McCarthy can land the Bears job, he gets a young quarterback that has high potential. He has good weapons. I mean, we've seen the McCarthy offense be great, right? And I don't think that's just all Dak Prescott running it. It's not like when you're talking about McDaniels, like, wow, yeah, Tom Brady did all of that. But McCarthy's had really good offenses. I think he can help Caleb Williams develop. I wouldn't hate that. I don't get why the Saints would hire McCarthy. They need to just rebuild, and they refuse to do so. The Bears have already started the rebuild process. So it makes sense to bring in a veteran head coach to help them finish it off. The Saints are just starting. Like you don't bring in a head coach that I don't know that I wouldn't get the Saints connection, but the Bears is interesting to me.
Yeah, I ranked the coaching openings, and the Bears are number one because you have Caleb Williams, and you can start with that. And the Patriots are there too because they have Drake May. So when you get that franchise young quarterback that you can build around, it helps you control your salary a little bit. You have a little bit more to spend. We saw that with the Commanders; they blew things up. They knew they were going to get a rookie quarterback. They just spent and upgraded everywhere and used their draft picks well. So you want to look for the Commanders-like environment if you're going to be a coach of a team. Now, look, we've gone 2 for 2 with Baker Mayfield being a pretty good quarterback here with Dave Canales and Liam Cohen. After the way the season ended, I don't know if I'm super confident that you're going 3 for 3, but would it change your mind about Baker Mayfield next year if Liam Cohen gets one of these jobs?
I don't think Liam Cohen will get one of these jobs.
Okay.
I don't think he was like, I mean, he had a great season. The Buccaneers had a great offensive season. I just don't think he's there yet for a team to trust him to be a head coach.
Okay.
But hey, maybe I'm wrong. But if he does leave, then yeah, poor Baker. I mean, that would be his 8th different offensive coordinator in his career if he has to change again. He has not had the same coordinator in back-to-back years since 2020 and 2021 with Alex Van Pelt. And that was the only time in his career he has had the same OC in back-to-back years. Like, and Baker's getting it done. So I guess we have to say, even if they change, if they can find another good OC, like Baker should be fine. We were worried about him going from Canales to Liam Cohen, and it turned out he had even a better season than he had with Canales.
Yeah, I think his defense still needs to rebuild a bit. I mean, Lavonte David's getting older. Their corners can stay healthy. They need to revamp their pass rush. They have a couple young guys that they like, and Elijah Cansey and Yaya Diaby, but these guys need a lot of help on the pass rush. So that could also lead to the Buccaneers being pass happy again. And if Cohen's there, then it's all status quo, and we trust what they do. I think they'll go after a wide receiver to help with the Chris Godwin injury and worry about his future. Now, the team that Alex Van Pelt and Baker Mayfield were on together, the Browns, Van Pelt just relieved of duties in the Patriots system here. They add an offense coordinator. Now, keep in mind, Kevin Stefanski is still the play caller, but Tommy Rees was the tight ends coach. He replaces Ken Dorsey, and we thought they were going to go a little pass happier. I think they may be just kind of readjusting, right, with Dorsey. Will this kind of take them back to running the ball a little bit more? I don't know. I mean, the Browns offense looks like one we want to stay away from hard next year with Watson rupturing his Achilles again.
It depends on what quarterback they get in the draft, right? They should be
Yeah.
looking for a quarterback with that top pick they have there. And if they bring in a guy that we're excited about that has mobility, maybe he can change around this organization as fast as Jaden Daniels changed around the Commanders. And it wasn't that long ago that we saw Baker Mayfield come in and change this organization. And, they moved on from that for Deshaun Watson, who is just, I don't even know what to say
His
about him.
career's probably over now. I mean, two ruptured Achilles. It's not looking
and he
good.
wasn't wearing his boot. So he wasn't wearing his boot in a picture in a video. And so maybe the Browns can actually get out of this contract and save themselves. That would be huge for them. But this is offense overall that's just looking like you're going to stay away in fantasy. And then the Seahawks moved on from Ryan Grubb, their OC, after one season. I mean, they were middle of the pack in offense, so I guess they weren't happy with that. And it did seem like everything in that offense was just really hard. Especially like it just didn't seem to work so well as it worked for him in college in the NFL. So I get why they moved on from him. We'll see who they hire. But again, that like Geno Smith will now have a third different OC in 3 years.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's not good. I mean, Geno Smith was less inspiring than Baker. Let's just be honest. It was not as good for Geno. He's a little bit older. It just didn't look good. I mean, Baker was putting up the numbers where Geno was way off the radar in most fantasy matchups we've been playing. So we'll see. I still think the Seahawks could change their mind on sticking with Geno next year. I wouldn't mind them going and getting a younger quarterback and changing things up to unlock these guys a little bit more. They got to figure out DK Metcalf if they want to keep him. So there's all kinds of things we have to watch in Seattle. But I think the assets that we're going to watch going forward, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Zach Charbonnet, to see if he can cut into more Kenneth Walker's work and to see how that develops. Because I think there's a lot of questions, more questions than answers on the Seahawks. Now we'll get into some other teams that have some questions with some player issues with the early news and notes from the NFL offseason right after this next break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Gametime app. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I use this app all the time when I'm buying tickets for many reasons, but I love that I get a panorama view of my seat before I buy, so I know exactly what to expect when I arrive. It takes me seconds to buy tickets on the app. It's so incredibly easy. 2 taps and you're set. And then they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. They have event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantee, and job loss assurance. You get to take the worries and the guessing work out of buying tickets with Gametime. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, my Steelers, they stink. And I knew they were going to get blown out by the Ravens, but they have a lot of decisions to make. It seems like they're just going to stick with Mike Tomlin for the rest of my life. Like I just plan to watch this team go 10-7 and lose miserably in the wild card round for the next 50 years. But they're non-committal about Russell Wilson, which thank you. Like, please move on from him. I think it's hard because he's such a nice guy. And he had a little bit of a good stretch, but the Steelers' points in the last 5 games of the year, including that wild card round, 13, 17, 10, 17, 14. And Russell Wilson looked terrible and pretty much all of those performances. So I really hope they move on. I don't know the answer. I'd rather stick it out with Justin Fields and just, maybe have a losing season for once. If Fields isn't good, I'm okay with that to rebuild, but I hope it's not Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and another thing the Steelers passing game is dealing with, it came out that really George Pickens was late to the Christmas game. So now there's some talk. Are they going to move on from George Pickens? I mean, they already moved on from Deontay Johnson, who, by the way, is released by the Texans. So he's gone from the Steelers to the Panthers to the Ravens to the Texans to back as a free agent. So they already had an issue with their last wide receiver. Do you think they'll move Pickens, and do you want them to move Pickens?
No, I don't want them to move Pickens. He's their only good wide receiver. I think he's frustrated with how bad the offense is and his quarterbacks. And he's never played with a good quarterback in his career. wide receivers just have that diva aspect about them, and especially Steelers wide receivers. So that's the one good thing Mike Tomlin does. He can normally handle that. And once they're out the building, it's terrible. So, I mean, buyer beware if the Steelers are looking to actually trade Pickens and willing to do it. Because like I said, like you said, Deontay Johnson, they traded him last year for like nothing. You're like, what? Why? And now he's been cut by 3 teams since just this season. You had Antonio Brown, they traded away a handful of years ago for a 3rd-round pick, never even played with the Raiders. You had Chase Claypool, they traded away for the 1st pick in the 2nd round to the Bears, and he did nothing. So they know when to trade guys away. So I guess if they do it, that says something about Pickens, but I think he'll still be on the team next year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they have to keep him because it's not going to attract a quarterback or help a young quarterback develop, such as a Quinn Ewers or somebody they could get in the 1st round if you don't have that go-to receiver. You don't usually tell the go-to receiver to go away when you're adding a rookie quarterback. You usually keep that guy. So Pickens, I think they'll work it out with him. He was definitely playing well. He was the one kind of bright spot in the wild card game with his big plays there. So Tank Dell, it does not look good. More knee setbacks here for Tank Dell. I don't know. This looks not very good for him going forward. I think the Texans clearly showed they need a wide receiver maybe again. I know they had John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson and these mixed bag of dudes, but Nico Collins got the big contract, but it was a huge drop-off in usage in other players without him. We'll see about Stephon Diggs. He's now coming off a major knee injury. He's older, in his 30s, and a free agent. So I think this is a real concern next year, I think, for CJ Stroud to find that number 2.
Yeah, they're going to have to add someone. Maybe it's just for a year because I think Tank Dell is not going to do much next year if he comes back at all.
Yeah.
But it might be 2 years from now until we can see Tank Dell back out there. It stinks, right? Because he was finally starting to come back from it. It took him a while to, get going this year after breaking his leg last year and getting shot in the off season. Like these are all freak accidents. What happened last year when he broke his leg at the goal line, this year when he's catching a deep pass and his own player runs into his leg, like I'm not going to be worried about injuries when he comes back. Like those are freak accidents, but it's going to be a while before we can see him again. Now that Packers game, let's talk about Jordan Love because he looked terrible as well. I know he didn't have a lot of weapons, and I think Jordan Love has a lot of issues on his own. I don't know why he keeps the way he throws off his back foot. Yeah. He needs to fix that. He needs to fix his accuracy. There's a lot of things. He's not willing to run either. There's a lot of things with Jordan Love he needs to fix, but they also need to get him a wide receiver 1. And this team has been so against finding like wide receivers or drafting them in the 1st round, right? But I do think it's time. If you want Jordan Love to develop fully, you already paid him. You get him better weapons.
Yeah, what a difference a year makes. After last year, he was beating the Cowboys. They were playing the 49ers, and they pushed them to the limit a little bit in the divisional playoffs. And everyone was vibing about Jordan Love. He had a good fantasy year. He was a top 12. He scored 30-plus touchdowns, ran when he needed to, and scored that way. But now it's kind of the anti-vibes. All those vibes are gone. Like you were excited about Watson and Doubs and what some of these guys could do with him next year. Now you're not. You've seen all of it come together, and it's not pretty. This was pretty much a Josh Jacobs carry team, and then Love was kind of the complimentary guy. I mean, in some games they look better with Malik Willis in there running a lot of plays. So I don't know what to think of Jordan Love going forward. I think right now, like they need something to say that kind of a sea change to say that I want to bang the table for Jordan Love as even a top 15 pick next year. And they lose their veteran QB coach, Tom Clements. He had a lot of influence in Aaron Rodgers. So we'll see what they do there. Maybe they can get him a better mentor there to help his confidence here because in Jordan Love, reality fantasy-wise, not someone that I'm really feeling a lot so far going into 2025.
Yeah, he's a guy that looks like when he like scrambles around just in the backfield, right? He doesn't ever like take off and actually get rushing yards. Like he refuses to. So it's just hard to trust him because he's going to have to throw so many touchdowns. Now, I do think Matt LaFleur has a great system. And if they get playmakers, Love could have another big touchdown year. It's just going to be hard to trust. Some other teams that we're going to be talking about that really need a wide receiver. I know like you have the Browns, Bengals, and Packers as your top 3. I would say the guys that have the young quarterbacks, right? Like the
Yeah.
Patriots and the Broncos and the
Mhm.
Panthers. Like those three teams need to add playmakers to their young quarterbacks to develop. The Patriots have to be the number one team, right? That needs a
Mhm.
wide receiver. But we should see a lot of new faces, a lot of new wide receivers being wide receiver ones heading into next season. So that will be exciting. And maybe we see another great rookie wide receiver class in fantasy.
Yeah, some of the names that are out there: Tedero McMillan of Arizona, Luther Burden the third from Missouri, of Isaiah Bond, who's now officially in the draft. He's a pretty good all-around receiver from Texas. So these are some of the names. Some people say the wide receiver class is down, but to me, I think there's a nice variety of options. And some of these receivers may not be like the typical guys. I mean, you have McMillan, who's tall and lanky, kind of like a Mike Evans with some speed and strength. But some of these guys are technicians. They can run all over the field with quickness, speed. That's what you're looking for these young quarterbacks to have. And Ashton Genty is another name we're going to look at in the first round. He's a running back. Now, I'll give you three teams. You tell me, put them in order, Michelle, of who needs a running back. Most of these teams, the Vikings, after they got eliminated, the Cowboys, and the Chargers, who have J.K. Dobbins as a free agent following this injury-riddled, but still somewhat healthy season.
Yeah, I'm going Cowboys all the way. I actually am predicting that Genty will be a Cowboy. And what would be the best offseason ever if they were able to land Ben Johnson as their head coach and then get Ashton Genty as their running back. So I would love to see that. We're going to get a lot more into these prospects and where we want them to land over the next, couple months before the draft. I'm excited to get into that. But that is it for today's show. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We'll be back tomorrow talking about more fantasy football goodness. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.